What's up, Taiwan? I'm Yvonne with 10 minutes of news from here in Taiwan and around the world. It's not about ideology, it's about money. That's a message from the foreign minister of Honduras, who says economic reasons are behind his decision to ditch Taiwan as a diplomatic ally. The decision leaves Taiwan with just 13 former partners. John Ventrias reports.
The flag flying atop this building will soon be coming down. This is Taiwan's soon-to-be former embassy in the Central American country of Honduras. The country's president floated the idea of cutting ties with Taiwan even before taking office. Now, more than a year into her term, she's making the move. Honduras will now recognize China instead. China claims Taiwan as part of its territory, and in its campaign to isolate Taiwan, it makes countries pick a side. Honduras says mounting foreign debt is behind the switch. The country owed around $8 billion in the last quarter of 2022. Its debts to Taiwan amount to $600 million. Honduras asked to renegotiate this debt and for Taiwan to double its yearly aid to $100 million. But it says the results of this discussion were less than fruitful.
El país se enfrenta a una crisis muy compleja en varias de las temáticas. Y por lo tanto la presidenta, después de un año de estar en estas conversaciones con Taiwán, pues no se recibieron las respuestas esperadas.
Taiwan says it promised to help the country's development within its means, but it says it won't engage in a battle of dollar diplomacy with China. The switch is a blow for Taipei, which will now have 13 diplomatic allies, most of them in Latin America, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. These allies speak on Taiwan's behalf in organizations like the UN, where Taiwan is barred due to Chinese pressure. Honduras says the switch is not about ideology, but some of the country's analysts are skeptical.
No, para China el interés es meramente político. Es quitarle otro aliado a Taiwán y hacerle frente a Estados Unidos. Eso es lo que sucede. Miren, nosotros somos parte de las piezas de un ajedrez internacional, pero nosotros no lo entendemos. Y creemos que somos grandes jugadores si establecemos relaciones con China. Estamos siendo utilizados por China.
Back in Taiwan, the more than 100 Honduran students on Taiwan government scholarships are worried about the future, especially given what's happened to students from other former Taiwan allies when relations were cut.
And I know how hard they've worked for this, like for having a scholarship, and this is out of their hands. So the future is uncertain. Like, for example, I've seen previous examples with Nicaragua. They need to start all over again their studies, or they just continue their studies in China. But however, time is something you don't get back.
The loss of Honduras as an ally comes as an embarrassment to Taiwan's president Tsai Ing-wen ahead of her expected April trip to visit other allies in Central America, where her mission of shoring up ties will now have an added urgency. Damon Lin, Louise Watt, and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
North Korea has fired an intercontinental ballistic missile just hours before a major summit between South Korea and Japan. Japan said the missile appeared to fly higher than 6,000 kilometers for more than an hour. It landed in the sea between the Korean peninsula and Japan. Pyongyang has already fired multiple shorter-range missiles this week. The launches are meant to signal the country's anger over ongoing military exercises by South Korea and the United States. South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol has landed in Tokyo. It's the first visit to Japan by the South Korean president in 12 years. President Yoon will meet with Japanese Prime Minister Kishida Fumio on Thursday to discuss regional security. The two will also talk about supply chain cooperation. The meeting comes after South Korea proposed to compensate forced labor during Japan's colonial occupation of Korea. That move is aimed at settling the decades-old feud between the two countries. Experts say that both South Korea and Japan hope to mend ties and seek further security cooperation as North Korea continues to develop its nuclear weapons program. For more on the South Korea-Japan summit, our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Eleanor Shioli-Hughes, a security analyst with the Asia Group.
This is the first time that a South Korean leader has been invited to Tokyo for this kind of meeting in 12 years. Why is this significant?
It's significant in that President Yoon, unlike his predecessor, President Moon Jae-in, who was much more focused on denuclearizing North Korea, that he wants to take earnest measures to thaw relations on a bilateral level between South Korea and Japan. To be clear, the last time a South Korean president did step foot onto Japan was 2019 when Moon Jae-in attended the G20 in Osaka. That said, it wasn't on a bilateral level. When President Yoon, took office last May, I think he made it quite clear that he wants South Korea to play a bigger role in shaping the Indo-Pacific region and even the world more broadly, which is why, South Korea as of late has been, labeled the global pivotal state. And South Korea also recently launched its inaugural Indo-Pacific strategy, and there's quite a bit of strategic alignment between South Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy as well as Japan's security and more broadly strategic objectives in the Indo-Pacific region.
We've seen an increase in cooperation between US, Japan, and South Korea. But do you think we'll see more exchanges between South Korea and Japan, given that they share this kind of immediate threat from Russia in the north, North Korea, and as well as Chinese aggression in the East China Sea?
That's a great question, and I think it's a good point that you brought up Russia, because one of the common things that both Prime Minister Kishida and President Yoon share is that they're actually both the first leaders from their respective countries to attend the NATO summit last June. And, earlier this year, NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg visited both Korea and Japan, I think for the purpose of enhancing defense cooperation in support of the Ukraine's war efforts in fighting the aggression against Russia. On top of that, you were saying about the military exercises, and I think there will also be deepening consultations on a trilateral basis. And from one report that I read with with President Yoon, is that they definitely also want to deepen cooperation on economic security, particularly those that are considered strategic technologies, including semiconductors. South Korea has a very strong semiconductor industry. In the meantime, I think, compared to a few decades ago, I think Japan's semiconductor industry is not at the same level as that of South Korea, but at the same time, if they, integrate supply chains a little bit more, then the two countries, I believe, they might see that more as like force multipliers. And I think the other purpose of this summit is to, make reassurances as well as, tighten those business linkages as well and keep that open so that there could be more avenues of cooperation on business exchanges between South Korean and Japanese companies.
That was security analyst Eleanor Shioli-Hughes speaking to our reporter Jaime Ocon. Chinese billionaire businessman Guo Wengui has been arrested in the United States on charges of fraud. The U.S. Justice Department says Guo and his financiers scammed thousands of his online followers out of more than $1 billion. The media personality and political activist, who also goes by the English name Miles Kwok, has been living in exile in the United States since 2015. He's an associate of Steve Bannon, a senior advisor to former U.S. President Donald Trump. Guo became popular for his policy ideas regarding China and his advice on ways to earn money. European banking giant Credit Suisse has become the latest financial institution to find itself in trouble. The bank's share plunged by as much as 30% on Wednesday, with other banking stocks also finishing in the red. The sell-off began after Credit Suisse's largest shareholder said it wouldn't be investing any more money. The banking group made a loss of almost $8 billion last year. The Swiss Central Bank has pledged to provide emergency funding if needed, but Credit Suisse's chairman has assured investors that its finances are stable. This is the latest in a series of banking crises to occur over the past week, following the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank in the U.S. Higher interest rates around the globe have seen the value of many banks' investments fall, leaving them more exposed to financial shocks. Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. Remember to download the TaiwanPlus app for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, today, we'll leave you with images of a Malaysian tapir family at Taipei Zoo. I'm Yvonne Yang. Take care and see you next time.